Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and whenever you're watching this. Welcome back to the Post-Post-Race Debrief, but this is the F1 Academy edition. And I've got a dear friend of ours, Niharika, is probably going to join sometime later, but this is Manvi Mittal. If you haven't already known, or if you're under the rock like some of my friends are, and I occasionally am, she is the host of the Females in Motorsport podcast. And this is a podcast that you need to tune into in order to understand where female drivers come from, their stories, their lives. These are amazing conversations that you need to know if you are a true motorsport fan. But just to kick things off, Manvi, first of all, thank you so much for joining in.
Thank
We
you so much for having me. I'm very excited. I'm always excited to talk about F1 Academy. And I love that you're actually dedicating time in your show to this because I haven't seen that a lot. So I'm very excited to be here and talk about the series.
if there was one person that we had to absolutely call aboard just to talk about F1 Academy, it had to be you because who better than you to have spoken to most of the grid? Am I right? Like a lot of them?
I've spoken to a few of the drivers, yes.
And you are probably the best source that we have to give us a bit of insight into what exactly is happening with F1 Academy and why it's exciting for anybody that tunes in at whatever race, right? Because if you didn't catch the first round, it's fine because the second round had plenty to offer. And I think
Yeah.
it's going to be the same going forward. But you were in Miami. I
hmm
bet you had a chance to watch the women live on track.
Yeah.
How was that?
It was amazing. I mean, the series itself is so competitive. It's really, really great to see all the women really, do such a great job. I mean, if I just had to mention one of them, I would say Abby, for example, really dominated the entire weekend. I think except FP1, she was leading all the sessions, and just seeing her progress from last year to 2024 has been a real treat. Anybody who's been following her career even before that just knows that she already is an excellent driver, but anything, takes a little bit more of like, um, a little bit more practice and all of that. And I think she really proved in Miami that she's leading the charge and she's absolutely crushing it. And I don't think it was just her. Of course, Dorian has been a new entry this year. She's, I think, also just kind of really carved herself out from the beginning. I think in Jeddah, she was obviously doing fantastically well. And then in Miami, while she was not on the top of the podium step, she was obviously still had great pace. She obviously has had a lot of success in like endurance racing, single seaters now. So personally, that's somebody I actually have not spoken to yet, but I would love to hear from her about how she's just this all-rounder driver across all series. It's absolutely fantastic to see that. And I think that just generally seeing that, F1 Academy race next to F1, it's such a great moment of exposure for all of these drivers. F1 Academy last year was not broadcast, and it was very challenging, even for somebody like me who was trying to follow the series very actively to actually keep up with what was happening. I was reading post race recaps and all those things, which were helpful, but the whole allure of racing is to be able to see it. So now I think this year it's been really, really great that it's not only being broadcast, but it's also happening next to F1 races. So for anybody who's going to an F1 race, which we know is usually sold out, is such a great moment of exposure for all these girls in F1 Academy.
And I like that you spoke about Abby Pulling specifically. I think everybody who follows or has been following W Series to
hmm
F1 transition, sorry, F1 Academy transition, it doesn't matter where you kind of tuned into it, but you always knew and heard of Abby Pulling.
Yes.
Because she was quite a popular racing driver,
hmm
regardless of whether it's females in motorsport or just motorsport in general.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's come up this weekend against a very charging, very polished Dorian Ma, and she's taken her head on head. It's brilliant. I think when I was seeing her and the kind of the calm nature that she had on
hmm
track is insane. Because you would assume that when you're being charged down by somebody like Dorian,
Yeah.
you would start to get a little shaky, but she didn't.
Yeah, she's very calm, very emotionally stable, I think. And I think that is a skill that's hard to learn for any young athlete. We've seen that in F1, we've seen that in F2, that's something that, and I can empathize with that. It's not easy to obviously harness your emotions when especially you're so, there's adrenaline, you obviously want to win. There's so much going on. She is, I think, one of the calmer drivers out there, and I think that's a really big strength for her. And you can see, she was very much in control. If you take race 1 for example, I think she led every single lap. She was in control from the start of the race, and she finished with, I think, over a 5-second gap. And that's amazing for someone who, I think last year when she came into F1 Academy, I think she was a fan favorite. I
Yeah,
know that she was a fan favorite in my head, and I think everybody expected a little bit more out of her. Not that she did not perform well last year, but I think Marta Garcia just really blew it out of the water last year. And I think everybody expected a little bit more of Abby. And now this year, I think she's really gone from strength to strength and showing, like, yes, this is why everybody expects so much from me, because she is absolutely crushing it.
absolutely. And I think I want to bring up one other driver that she's from Southeast Asia and India, and
Mhm.
she's probably the closest in terms of like whom we can relate to. Just even her career and her story is somewhat similar, and we've heard these stories before. And it's Bianca Bustamante.
Mhm.
She had a bit of a rocky start to the
Yes.
season, but I think in Miami she really turned it around. Both the races, she did stall in the first race,
Yeah.
but she made a good drive back. And in the second race, she maintained that P2.
Yeah. Second race, she was honestly so fantastic. Even in quali, I think there were moments where she was doing really, really well. There was I think you could see that it was mostly between Doria and Abby and Maya as well. But Bianca did have these like sprouts of like really fast laps. And that's why she has such a good position, starting position in race 1. Unfortunately, she made that small error. But I think that's the thing about F1 Academy. These are not fully polished drivers, they're still in training. So those errors will happen. I think that's kind of the part of it. And I think it's great to see that she did not make that error the second time around, and she really pulled it through the second race. So that's, I think, kind of the point of F1 Academy as well. That, yeah, whatever you're taking in your learnings, you're actually implementing that in the next session you have. So, and Bianca, I think, in many ways is unofficially the face of F1 Academy. She's really blown up on the face of, all media, press, sponsorships with McLaren and everything, which is great. I'm very, very happy to see that for her. And I think a lot of people, because we've seen this happen in the past, right? Like if you take like Lewis Hamilton, for example, when he started venturing into like fashion and all those different collaborations, people started questioning his integrity, his work integrity in racing. And I hope that doesn't happen with Bianca, because I do think that she is still delivering on track. And all these things, I'm sure like her media days are like absolutely insane, but she's really pulling it together and delivering results. And I think that also just needs to be celebrated.
I lost you for a second there, but I will catch up to you a little later. One thing that I want to I think what you mentioned is absolutely true, because I remember when Lewis Hamilton started going into all these other so-called side quests,
Hmm.
and people were, and this was right at the peak of his kind of his racing career, right? And if he could manage that alongside the racing, I don't see why Bianca can't.
Yeah.
And to be honest, what she's doing and her team, CBR Media as a whole, are doing is incredibly good,
Hmm.
because that's the kind of exposure that you need
Yeah.
in an academy. I mean, the series is meant to bridge a gap for sure, but it is also meant to put them on a pedestal, because you
Hmm.
need investments in females within motorsport and generally female athletes as a whole, because that is the parity that we have currently.
Yeah.
Um, what what are you more excited about in terms of with respect to the commercial partnerships that's happening within Formula One Academy?
I am obsessed this year with the commercial partnerships that we have seen come through. I think what is really, really great is to see the breadth of the industries that have joined. So you have something like American Express, which is obviously like a financial bank like company. Then you have Charlotte Tilbury, which is a makeup brand. Then you have Puma, which has a long history with F1, but obviously a fitness brand. You have Tommy Hilfiger, which is a fashion brand. I'm loving the breadth of the industries that have really come through. Personally, just because I've worked in beauty and fashion, I'm the most excited about those kinds of brands coming in. And I can't say this no more than I've already said it already, but 40% of F1 fans are women. We know that. And I just see this as such a missed opportunity for beauty and fashion brands who don't enter the space right now, because that is their core target market: women under 25, women under 30. And all of these brands, and the thing about sports communities are that we are so engaged, we are so plugged in
Yeah,
that it's a very engaged audience to tap into. It's a very engaged demographic. So for
so
any brand to enter that space is actually hugely fruitful for them. So a brand like Charlotte Tilbury or QVC, and I think Tommy Hilfiger, I think those are the kinds of brands that I am the most excited about, because there is just so much to explore there. We have seen fashion blow up with Lewis Hamilton, with Guan Yu Zhou, you know, brands like Lululemon, and like all these companies have kind of come in through the channel of F1. But I think F1 Academy is actually one of those things that brands should really, really start tapping into if they haven't yet. Because if you take someone like Bianca Bustamante, she just did a collaboration with Sephora. She did a collaboration with she's on the cover of Vogue. I think all those things are things that you want to start at the bottom if you can as a brand, because it's a lot more authentic that way. You're just getting more bang for your buck almost. Let's say tomorrow, like obviously Bianca's going to continue to grow, knock on wood. Working with her is going to get more and more expensive for brands. So working with her or other drivers right now not only gives them the support that they truly deserve, but it also gives the brands that helping hand to be actually entering the sport, testing it out, seeing if it works for them at a relatively lower cost. So I think there's so many advantages for these brands to enter the space. I do find it very funny that so many brands have not entered the space right now. Like if you look at basketball and football in America, and by football I mean soccer, but um, you see brands like Dove or Glossier, these makeup and skincare brands making huge investments, and it's really paying off for them. So I think it's really time for other brands to take a page out of those books and try to mimic that with motorsport.
I think it's just a matter of time, right? Because
Yeah.
now that the US soccer viewer watcher numbers have
Hmm.
kind of skyrocketed, I think it makes sense for these kind of brands to stay invested and invest more into women's sports.
Yeah.
And considering that now, just over the weekend, we've had the news of F1 Academy hitting Netflix UK.
Yeah.
I think it's huge because now imagine an effect, a Drive to Survive effect happening to F1 Academy, which is, to be honest, what we kind of need at
Yeah.
the minute, because it's going to enhance everything, right? It's going to fill your coffers. One, second, you
Hmm.
get to have better drivers, better production, a much bigger scale of
Yeah.
challenge itself. And I just want your quick thought on that. I mean, what do you hope would happen with the F1 Academy hitting Netflix?
I mean, the hope is definitely that the drivers get the exposure they deserve. Netflix is obviously a huge platform, huge reach. And I hope that people actually tune in to watch it. I hope that it's obviously production wise well made, it's engaging for people to actually watch it. My biggest concern with anything like that, with projects like this, even though Hello Sunshine is a great production company, my concern is always that I hope that it is well made where people actually want to watch it. Because what happens is that, like, let's say the production company doesn't do a great job, unfortunately the drivers will have to face the brunt of that. Either they'll be told like, oh, your stories weren't engaging enough, or female athletes don't actually deserve our attention, when actually the show is just not well made. So
Mm.
my hope is that that's not the case. And I think it's a little unfair to expect that it's going to be exactly like Drive to Survive, because we know that with Drive to Survive, it was not just a show. It was like, it was COVID, it was like the creator economy, there was so much happening. So I really hope that content creators in F1 actually use it as an opportunity to familiarize themselves with F1 Academy and also help the sport grow. Because I personally don't think F1 would have reached where it is with just Drive to Survive alone. I think it was really like this whole circus of many things that just worked very well in partnership together. So I'm really hoping that creators also kind of jump on that bandwagon, and really help bring exposure, talk about the series, talk about the women, use it as an opportunity to familiarize themselves with the series and familiarize their audience with the series. Um, and I will say, like, not to be a cynic, but we at Females in Motorsport recently did a post about the Netflix series coming up next year, and it was just like so infuriating and honestly disheartening to see so many people still like leave negative comments on that kind of on that post. We had some.
What is the general consensus, though? I know you guys get the flack of all of it because you're reporting actively
Right.
on what's happening. And I want to know what's the general sentiment? Are people excited? Are people just dissing it because they expect something else?
I like to hope and I like to think that the general consensus is positive, that people are excited. People I know in F1 are excited, people I've spoken to are excited. So when I see comments like this, it really does upset me because people have commented. I mean, sometimes we would just like hide the comments just because um it is just, it's so disheartening, and it's honestly almost triggering for a lot of people. It's triggering for me sometimes because the kinds of things people write, I'm like, what, like, who hurt you? Who hurt you? Like, why are you like this? Like, people will talk about like, oh, like, this is such a waste of money, I would never watch that, like yawning emojis, like, honestly, respectfully, and I'm gonna curse right now, fuck off is what I would say to anyone like that, because it's really just so frustrating to see that. But I think that the general consensus is positive. People are looking forward to it. I do think that Hello Sunshine will do a great job. It's a production company that has a lot of success in producing great shows. So my fingers, toes, and everything is crossed. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Okay, if it is Drive to Survive esque, what would be the main sort of titles that you would like to see? Just from
Oh,
empowerment perspective, right? Because Drive to Survive has had the history of fabricating certain things that never happened.
yes.
Um, and they make up a story out of nothing as well.
Yeah,
Sometimes, not every time, but
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
But just from you watched one whole season of F1 Academy plus two races this year. So what would you like to see on it?
Oh my
Just
God, I love this question. Okay. I think I would love to see one episode dedicated to Martha Garcia, obviously. I think we would have to. It would be a disservice to not. She was just so amazing last year. I think in the beginning it was like, we it was like a little bit of a toss up in the beginning, and then she just really like absolutely crushed it through the end of the season. I think there were three races because also the format last year was different. There were three races, not two. And I think Martha actually won in race one of the season finale. If not one, then race two. I can't remember correctly, but she just had such amazing dominance, so much control, and she really grew from W Series, because W Series she was doing okay. And when I spoke to her after her win last year about how she went from W Series to F1 Academy, she really openly talked about bringing her emotions in control and just focusing on her mental health and how that really helped change her driving style. And I would love for Netflix to go more in detail into that, because I think it can also be helpful for other athletes, but it's also a very compelling story to hear. And then also maybe a little bit into her success in other series and all of that. I would also love one's episode, although I'm pretty sure this is, well, actually, I don't know, maybe it will, but I don't
take
know.
note.
I would love one episode to really tell the truth behind the whole broadcast debacle of last year. Not that that's a story I think you need to, like, beat a dead horse anymore, but I do think that that was a very important aspect of season one, and there's learnings to take from it. And I think I would like to hear from F1 officials, the drivers, and all those people on how they felt about that, because I don't think everybody really expected that. I think it was a pretty like last minute decision. So I would like to hear a little bit more about like what actually happened, why that happened, and all of that. Then I would love to see an episode about bringing all these new commercial partners for 2024. Because I'm sure that process started last year, and all these new partners like Amex, Tommy Hilfiger, QVC, Charlotte Tilbury, like these are such interesting conversations to be had. And I would love to get a little bit more of like what happened inside, those rooms, and what was it that the brands were looking for, and like who did they want to work with, and all of that. Um, I think I would also love one episode about how the drivers were chosen for 2024. This is a question I get asked quite a bit when I'm a guest on other podcasts about like how do drivers get recruited. I think it's probably very similar to how like F2 and F3 drivers get recruited, like their teams looking out and all of that. But I don't think anybody truly knows. So I think that would be really interesting for a viewer to understand about what teams look for, how like Mercedes decided on Dorian Pan versus McLaren decided for Bianca Bustamante, and how like what that means in terms of the like for example like Leah Block is of course a part of Williams, but she's racing with ART. So I don't think people really understand how that works. So I think
Right.
that would be really interesting. Same thing like Nerea Marti is a Tommy Hilfiger driver, but she's obviously like Tommy Hilfiger is on her team. So to have that sponsorship aspect, I think would be really interesting as well. Um, and then I think it would be really interesting to hear from drivers like Leah Block and Dorian Pan, who are not originally from. Well, Dorian has had success in single seaters, but she's been with Iron Dames, and Leah's been with rally racing as well. So I think that would be also very interesting to understand how they kind of came to single seaters and that success and like all of that. I think that could be really interesting also.
I think that's amazing actually. I would love to tune into the commercial bit of things
Yeah.
because it's really interesting, and I think it's a very valid point as well. Even to this day, I know of the mechanics of the
Hmm.
operational stuff of F1 Academy, how it works and so on, but then there are certain linkages that I still haven't made.
Yeah.
For instance, that the Tommy
Yeah.
analogy that you gave was actually perfect, because there's a Tommy team, but it's not really a race team. So
Right.
where exactly are we kind of putting it in? The same thing with Amex, for instance. They're with F1 Academy cars. So what exactly is happening? But
Yeah.
these things, I think, the more you tune in to the sport, you kind of learn along the way.
Hmm.
It's a bit of that.
Well, it depends. And I'm sure we'll go into this at some point, but it depends on like the way the show is being talked about. Well, the series is being talked about, and the excellent commentary that apparently happened in Miami on track. So,
For sure, for sure. One thing before I get onto the on track stuff again. Right now, one of the questions that a lot of people have asked me is, to what extent is F1 Academy like a giant marketing platform
mm-hmm.
versus how much of it is an actual racing series? And I know the racing bit is obvious because you get to see it, but then the intention of it kind of comes off as a bit of a marketing platform. What are
I
your
think
thoughts?
that's a very fair question to ask, and it's tough. I will say I do think it's both. And then there are moments where I feel like this is leaning a little bit too marketingy for me. Like, for example, there are celebrities obviously who were there at Miami, as Miami always has celebrities. But you see them posing with F1 Academy drivers, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing because obviously it gives them exposure. And like, let's say a driver's posing with Kendall Jenner. Like, how I don't know how much Kendall Jenner truly cares about racing, but obviously she is a huge name, and being associated with that kind of like, celebrity fandom, it can be amazing. It can mean like a feature story in like the Daily Mail. And not like the Daily Mail is some like journalistic, like, integrity, like a beacon of integrity by any means, but it has a massive reach. People read that shit. So,
Yeah.
I feel like it depends. I do think that the balance is important because the one of the biggest challenges in sports, and this is across all sports, is that women athletes and their names are not as recognized. There was this campaign that I think it was earlier this year that I'm absolutely in love with. It was a Canadian ice hockey team, and it was
Right.
this beer company that recognized that basically on women's jerseys, because women usually have longer hair, their names on top of the jerseys and they get hidden because of their hair. So the beer company came in, put their logo on top, and put the girls' names at the bottom. I think that was so clever, so smart. I mean, I'm a PR girl, so for me, this is like my Christmas. But I think it was just so interesting and very well demonstrates that yes, women's names are just not as recognized, and it's all because of these small things that we don't even think about. So I think that coming back to F1 Academy, I think it is really important to make sure that the series is marketable. And I think where the breakdown happens is that a lot of people compare it to like an F2 and F3, which are not marketable series. They're not marketed at all. They're not meant to be marketed. um, but I think that F1 Academy needs to be marketed. And I can say this all the time that women don't need equal resources, we need equitable resources. We are not on a level playing field. So, equal doesn't really help us. Don't give us what the men have, give us something more tailor made, give us more marketing opportunities because we need that right now. In F2 and F3, respectfully, drivers don't need that to get selected into F1. Like Logan Sargent got pulled early just to go into F1, not because of marketability. So I think that the balance is important. Keeping that in mind, of course, we want to make sure that the F1 Academy is doing its job and actually training these women to be better drivers. One thing that I learned last year, I had the F1 Academy race director, Neu Santamaria, on that podcast, and she told me something very interesting that after every session, all the drivers obviously have like a briefing, like post race briefing, and they're all given advice, or like they're told like, oh, you did this, like avoid doing this next time, or you did this was really good. So it really is like an academy. It really is like a very well like made training program, which I think is really interesting and good. I don't know if the same values are being carried on to this year. This is more from last year, but I think as long as those both of those things are happening in a healthy balance, I think that's actually exactly what we need.
I think that's well put. Definitely well put. But just to close this subject off, I want to know if you think F1 Academy is actually achieving that balance.
It's a little hard to say, honestly, because we don't really get to see the academy portion of it. So what I know is from like having a guest on the podcast, and I think this is where like it's such a vicious circle, right? Like we can sit and talk about this here and be like, we don't know if it's happening, and I don't want to be cynical, obviously. So I don't want to say like, oh, I don't know if it's happening. I do think we see the marketing aspect because that's kind of like the purpose of the marketability. I do think that F1 Academy should probably be a little bit more open about the academy portion of the series so people understand that. Um, and I think that's where even the media comes in, and like I think it's great that like you and I are talking about this, and some people are talking about it. Elizabeth Blackstock talks about F1 Academy. Not a lot of media talks about it otherwise, like the real nitty gritty of it. So I think that's where we as media need to do our bit to make sure that the F1 Academy is doing this. We need to critically ask these questions, exactly the question that you asked me right now. Such a great question to ask. I think we need to pose these questions to F1 Academy, critically question what's happening, and question it in a healthy way. Like, not questioning Susie Wolf's work ethic and integrity and like stupid things, but actually question what the series is doing and how they're doing it and keeping them accountable.
Absolutely. And I think, taking this whole accountability aspect and the fact that media still doesn't talk about it as extensively as they should, because it
Yeah.
is a category worth talking about. We had, disappointing is the least possible way we can put it, but it's a quite a disappointing thing that happened in Miami where the on track commentators were using kind of sexist language.
Hmm.
Uh, commenting on the appearance of drivers that were going up on the podium and all these things. I was wondering if you had a chance to just review these things because obviously your commentary might have been different, and your feed might have been different, but did you have a chance to go through what was happening and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, or maybe actually fortunately, I did not hear any of these live, because my feed was different. But I had a chance to, we got a lot of messages about it. I had a chance to review some videos and, you know, people like tweeting about it and everything. And it seems to me that exactly what you said, that the on track commentators were making very sexist remarks about the female drivers. I think one example I heard about was that when Abbi Pulling was going to the podium, they were making comments about her appearance, that she looks younger than she actually is, something like that. And, talking about like their stamina and like just things that you would actually never hear anything about a male driver. Not only an F1 driver, but a male driver. And there were comments being started with the phrase, I don't mean to be sexist, but. I mean, this is just, it's this is where, like, the frustration comes back into play, where it's just like, how much more do we need to do? And what's frustrating to me is that if this is an FIA accredited, FIA approved F1 employed commentator, that is a huge problem, actually. Because let's go back to our first conversation during this show, that the point of having F1 Academy race with F1 is that people who are, selling out stadiums to watch F1 get to experience F1 Academy. If this is their experience watching F1 Academy, who's going to watch the series? Um, and it's just like, it defeats the entire purpose of the series. It's not inspiring at all to able to watch this. And people are very personable, fans are personable, and some people are thinking critically enough to be like, okay, this is wrong. But some people might get affected by that in a way that, oh, they're right, like this is yeah, these women like don't deserve to be here, or whatever it is. So I actually think that this is a very, very big problem that I really hope is being escalated. I believe that Laura Winter did a tweet about her escalating this issue, which I'm not surprised. She's always been the one to champion women, so I'm very, very happy to see that she's taking this seriously. It really is just very disheartening, and honestly, it's kind of unbelievable. Like, on track commentators are speaking like this. It blows my mind that how is this even happening?
In 2024 in America, where if there's one country that I think has done women's sports right or almost right, it's
Yeah,
the US. You know, the US national team, the soccer champions of multiple times, I guess,
yeah.
with gender parity, they finally,
Hmm.
managed to gap that bit, like bridge that gap. All of that's happening. And then you have on track commentators in the US talking about
It's
this.
honestly ridiculous. And I'm going to tell you a story right now. When I was watching the race, I was actually with a friend who was invited by Tommy Hilfiger. And so we were very, very fortunate to be in the paddock club on race day. And we were watching the race from the balcony that overlooks the starting grid. And like, there's basically like screens over there that once the cars go from the starting grid, you can watch the race from the screen. I believe it was a practice session. I can't remember which session it actually was, but there was a moment where there was a yellow flag. And I was standing behind my friend. So she just turned to me and said, "Oh, Manvi, yellow flag." And I said, "Okay." There was a guy standing in front of her who turns around to her and says, "Oh, yellow flag means that the drivers are going to go slow now." And he said it in this very slow, condescending, patronizing tone. And my friend just looked at him and, obviously, like, told him that literally I've been watching racing since I was 8 years old. Like, I know what
Dude,
a yellow flag is.
please.
Um, and it's just, it's so baffling to me because what happens, and I'm sure you feel this as well. When you create content online, you get used to comments like this. I've had comments about, like, I can't even tell you the kinds of comments I've had on my podcast. I've had comments about, like, I blink too much. I don't even know what that means. So people will just find anything to comment on, but you always think it's restricted to the internet. You actually forget that there's real people behind this. At least I do. And then when you see this happen to you in person, it like it kind of is like, it's almost like a slap in your face, like, oh, I forgot these people actually exist.
And hey,
um
contextualize this. You are in a paddock club. And
Yeah.
you would assume the people there, I
Yeah.
mean, the ones who are there, they're, let's say, more intellectually
Yeah.
led,
Yeah.
right?
It was honestly like so unbelievable, but also so believable at the same time. Um, I honestly, I've reached this point where I just think, like, what am I supposed to say to you? Like, what do I even say to you anymore? Because clearly you have no interest in educating yourself about 40% of the fandom of the sport are women. So if you think a woman standing behind you just doesn't know what the sport is or what a yellow flag is, it's honestly pretty ridiculous, and it just shows to me that you actually know nothing about the fandom of the sport. Um, it's just like at this point I don't know what to say anymore.
I think just to, with respect to the on-track commentators, I think the most obvious thing that they can do going forward, and I hope that the escalation actually leads to some
Yeah,
investigation and some sort of result after that.
yeah.
But we've got plenty of content creators who are
Mhm.
doing fantastic job covering from F1 Academy. I think having just one of them every race alongside an actual commentator, the one that does it for the TV, so that they have a little more awareness about what's going on. I think that would be like a fantastic opportunity because I
That
think
would be
people,
amazing.
for instance, you have so much of knowledge about the sport, and why aren't they giving people like you a platform to just, co-commentate? For instance, you
I
can't
think
go.
you should pitch this to F1 Academy.
It'll be so cool. And I think the person that you went with is Michaela. And Michaela is, we know, we've seen her content and she's very
Yeah,
knowledgeable on that front. And
yeah,
I think she brings a bit of that sprinkle and the sort of sauce that you need
yeah,
for making commentating, interesting or keeping
yeah.
it light. And I think F1 Academy, Netflix, whoever is watching this, please take notes.
I
Please
do
take.
think that I don't think I could ever be a commentator if I'm being completely honest. I think it's a very difficult job. I I don't think I can speak for that. I mean, I'm a podcaster, but I don't think I can speak for that long. Like, that you really can't have a dull second. You
Yeah.
have to have something to say all the time. And I will say this, that the one thing I really miss when I'm watching races on track is Crofty's commentary. I really do miss it. Like, I actually miss that, like, lights out, away we go. I really do think commentary is such an art, and I don't think I could do it if I'm being completely honest. I just feel like I just don't think I could speak for that much and actually make sense. But like, FE has done a program where they actually did like a talent search for a presenter. So, and they chose Darren, who is like amazing. I absolutely love her work. So I think F1 Academy could definitely do that. I think that's actually a very good idea. And if they do that, then everybody heard it here first.
Yes. Oh, that'd be so cool. And I think I will submit an anonymous application on your behalf because I think you can do it. I think you genuinely can do it.
Oh my God. I don't know. I feel like I don't know. My fun fact, my sister is a broadcast journalist. And my mom used to be a broadcast journalist as well. I believe she may have done some commentary as well, but I'm not sure. Um, but I don't know.
But
I don't
it,
personally think I would be able to do
it's
it,
in
but
your DNA.
maybe,
But
perhaps.
anyway, I think we should probably wrap this whole thing up because there's so much more to
Yeah,
discuss, but there are so many more races that we can bring you on board for and post, so that we can like break down further. There are going to be these kind of things that will happen, but I think as a community, as a fandom, I think we need to speak up against
yeah.
it. And we need to bring it into light. And whoever this commentator is, I'm not really sure who it is. I'm sure he got the message.
I hope he did. I really hope he did. And if he didn't, then I mean, there's multiple players to blame them, not just him.
Yes, yes. We'll have you on the comms box next year,
No.
maybe.
Imagine. We'll host this show from the commentary box next time.
Oh, that'll be fun. That'll be a lot of fun.
That'll be amazing. I feel like we should just do this together.
Imagine it. See, you do need an actual broadcaster for sure,
You
but
know who actually I think would be really, really great at this? Is Ash Vandelay.
I agree. I agree. I think she does a solid job.
Yeah, and she already does like Twitch streaming. I think she's done it for a lot of GTA series. I think
Yes.
also a couple of other things, maybe MotoGP as well.
Yeah,
I
she
think
did.
she would actually be fantastic at this.
Time to tag Ash Mantley.
I know, we must.
Well, Mami, thank you so much for your time. I had a blast chatting with you about F1 Academy. Very rarely do you see people with so much knowledge about a new series, a potentially, a game-changing series in a way. And it's nice to actually have a intellectual conversation with somebody like that. So thank you so much. And for everybody that tuned in that wants to watch F1 Academy, you don't really, first of all, want to miss it. But if
Yeah.
you didn't have a chance to watch it yet, please catch the replays if you can, because the racing's fantastic. The stories that these drivers have is amazing. And if
Yep.
you haven't yet somehow tuned into the FIM podcast, please, please, I will link it below. Go binge on those episodes because you need to hear those stories. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. And this is Ananya and Manvi signing off.